If you're the number one, you're the founder, and all you have are kind of, worker bees, so to speak, then you're still directing everything. You're the traffic cop every day, and you're just exhausted. And, you're happy. Maybe you're making some more money. Maybe you're not, or you're trying not to spend the money on the kind of person you need. And I often see owners in that category. They're not typically folks that I focus on, but I meet them through, conferences and things like that. They ask me. And I said, well, it looks like you really could use a good, PM or a good COO to help you operationalize this. And I said, well, but I don't want to spend the money. And I said, well, okay. It's like, unless you get people working for free, it's going to be tough. Or you're really good at grooming somebody younger earlier in their career, and you're good at that. But if you're not, you're going to need to bring somebody in who has some chops to begin with.
Hey, it's the Profit Answer Man, Rocky Lalvani. If you're new to the podcast, check out my interview with Mike Michalowicz. It's episode number 2. If you want to hear about each chapter in the Profit First book, go back and listen to episodes 3 through 13. Episode 1 is the why and how. On the Profit Answer Man, we learn money mastery without all the complicated accounting mumbo-jumbo, using a simple system. Your accountant is busy documenting your transactions and creating a rearview mirror of what happened. My guess is you don't even look at the reports they sent you. If you're like most business owners, you struggle with this, and it's not your fault. We aren't taught money in school, and accountants aren't taught how to be profitable. The Profit First system created by Mike Michalowicz works, and he certified me to help you implement the system in your business. Remember, the new equation is sales minus profit equals expenses. Let's face it, without cash flow, you can't pay your employees, buy needed materials, or pay your mortgage and support your family. I help you to do that and more, so you can focus on the parts of the business you love and receive the rewards for your labor and investment into your business. The stronger you are as a business owner, the more jobs you create, the better we are as a country. Small business owners are the backbone of America, and for that, you deserve to be well rewarded. Just remember, more revenue does not equal more profit. That's why we focus on the bottom line. Hey, we're doing something new. I'm going to have a live Q&A meeting on Zoom on March 22nd. At 1 p.m. Eastern Time. You can join us live and ask your questions. I'll be happy to answer them. If you can't make it that day, email your questions ahead of time and we'll put them in there and we'll answer them for all of you. So hopefully you can join us that day. I'm going to put a link in the show notes with Eventbrite code so that you can sign up and get notified and have the details for the call. So we hope to see you there on March 22nd. Every stage of business growth requires different steps and actions to get to the next level. However, if you build a good foundation based on the end game, those steps become so much easier to take. Today, we focus on gross profit and how small steps and actions can help you increase the number and how it multiplies your total profit. Jose Palomino helps owners of B2B businesses grow profitable revenue. For over 15 years, he's helped hundreds of B2B owners, CEOs, and leadership teams across a variety of B2B categories develop the value proposition, strategy, and action plans they need to unlock growth. At Value Prop, they help their clients get clarity on what they do best for customers that they value the most and build a growth strategy that highlights that unique strength. From there, they work with them to build out the plans and processes they need to grow their profitable revenues. Let's meet Jose. Welcome to the Profit Answer Man, Jose Palomino. It's great to have you join us today.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure, Rocky.
Can you share a little bit about yourself and your business?
Absolutely. So I'm the founder of Value Prop, and it's at valueprop.com. And what we do is we work with owner-led businesses almost exclusively in B2B, figure out their strategy for growth, just how to go about doing it, how to think about it, how to plan for it. All of those things are disciplines that a lot of business owners in, let's say, the under $20 million range don't really have processes around it, and they need help there. And that's what we help people do.
And I think if you're in that 7-figure range, it's all about building the processes. In the 6-figure range, it's all about increasing sales and getting to the next level. And then you get to a certain size where you really have to build out your processes and then build your strategy for how to get to the next level. Each stage has its own needs and its own set of helpers, so to speak.
No, I agree 100%. And I think part of it is that, especially for those who've actually started their business like from scratch and they grew it to, and then now they're sitting at 8 or 9 million, something like that, that classic entrepreneurial story. You've gotten to the point where you can't just hustle, effort your way past the next level. You got to be organized. Like the first million might be just hustle and just, that chutzpah and the just going after it. But you get past a certain point. Now you got to deliver on what you sold. You have to be, and that's something maybe you never worried about before when it was just you and maybe one other person. But now it's 8. Also, you look around your office if you have an office, and there's 18 people there, and you go, "Wait, what is that guy doing?" And you need processes for that. And the other thing that happens when you don't have those processes, and I've seen this up close, is you end up with discouraged staff. So that becomes its own speed bump on your growth. Is people just feel like you just kind of everything's seat of the pants and nothing's really organized. So to your point about like maturation stages, it really plays into that's just a reality of life. Like you just need to have some process.
And that's the one thing I think most entrepreneurs generally hate, creating process.
Unless that's their business, right? No, you're right. Because they want to be able to, they love whatever it is that got them into the business in the first place, the thing they do, right? Whatever that is. They want to do more of that. And, but running a business, it's just about like you have like working capital, you have infrastructure, you have human capital, and people are looking for leadership. They're looking for direction. And unless you provide it for them, and it can't just be, don't worry, when you have a question, ask me, I'll answer it. Well, that doesn't scale. And people just still feel very insecure then because it depends what mood you're in as to whether or not they can make a decision. And then they won't make decisions. And everything, again, slows down once more because no one can move forward because they don't know what your decision might be in a particular moment.
But then you become the bottleneck. And that really
Absolutely.
Stifles everything.
Well, and again, I think I've had hard talks with owners over the years. Been doing this at Value Prop for over 17 years now, and especially I could do this a little bit more easily when I'm speaking to an owner group, like a Vistage group or something like that. And I say, 9 out of 10 times the main obstacle to your growth is in the mirror. And a lot of, many people will nod and go, yeah, I know what you're talking about. There's a few people that like, that's not true, but usually they're the ones that are most guilty. But they have the biggest blind spot, right? So they can't see it.
They can't. So one of the things we were chatting about was margin and gross margin. And many businesses are constrained. And one of the things that you said, which was kind of unique, is your margins tell the story of your unique values. I think a lot of times we don't realize, or we're scared to be unique, because if we feel like we're saying no to some people, we might be giving up business. I'd love to get your insights.
Yeah. So I look at it kind of just working with companies, and especially like in industrial categories, professional services, where there are, in any given neighborhood, you could throw a stone, just as far as you can throw, and you'll hit another company that looks like yours. Okay. And there's a lot you could, in any direction, doesn't matter, right? So you're a contract manufacturer, you're a small OEM, you're an engineering firm, accounting firm, and whatever it is, there are other people like you, like your firm, doing similar things for similar type customers. Just reality, right? So your margin, what you can enjoy in terms of what you can charge over what the basic cost of the service is, or the materials or whatever, that is the truth teller. That's the ultimate revealer of what your customers think about you. Because if you were the preferred choice, you would enjoy higher margins than your competitors. If you are always finding yourself in what I call a 3-bid situation, where you're always just, you might get the business, you might not. We're talking to 2 other suppliers. And what they're basically telling you is, because we believe that what you do is interchangeable with these other suppliers, then you're ultimately, and what most owners will do is they gravitate towards a pricing strategy to win the business. Let me know what your best deal is, and talk to us last. That kind of, whether explicitly said or implicitly understood, that you want the business no matter what. Well, what happens there is your margins suffer. And again, you're talking about this growth curve, right? Going from like startup stage to now you're a real, quote unquote, a real business. You have infrastructure, you have personnel, and so on. Well, all you can spend starts with your gross margins. That's the available money that from there all expenses have to come out of. And so just think about this. Even sometimes I hear owners tell me, well, you don't understand. We're in a very tight margin business. We're in a particular type of contract manufacturing business, and the best gross margins we can expect here are like 20 points. So I say, okay, well, it's a supermarket would be another one. That's like, an 8-point business, but large volume. And so you said 20 points. So let's think about that for a moment. What would it mean to you if you were above average and you did 21 or 21 and a half points? Or you're below average, you're at 18 points. What's the difference in the quality of life? What happens to your business? They say, oh, that's easy. At 22 points, I'd be expanding. I'd be hiring another salesperson. At 18 points, I'm letting people go. And I learned this lesson early in my career, Rocky, when I was doing actually software development work. And it was a while, when dinosaurs roamed the earth, as my children would say. And I worked for a guy who was in a chemical distributor. And I was a thin margin business. His name was Don. May he rest in peace. He was a great guy. Taught me a lot about business early on. And I noticed something, that it seemed that he was always able to enjoy about a penny more a pound. And he sold commodity chemicals. Like that, a penny more a pound than his competitors. And I asked him how he did that. And he said, Jose, here's the difference. When I do a delivery and my customer calls me and says one of the drums was missing or was broken, the bag was broken, whatever the product was that we were selling, my competitor's asking for photographic evidence, an affidavit, and it's a long process before they make them whole, if they ever do. They find ways to not, because after all, I only made so much money on that container. I, on the other hand, immediately send a replacement unit to them. So what happens is they call me and they say, Don, somebody's offering me 28 cents for this product, a metasilicate product or something. And you're asking, the last time I bought from you was 33 cents. I can't do 33 while I'm sitting on a 28-cent offer. Can you do better? And Don would say, well, what if I gave you 29 and 3/8 or something like that? And he said, done. And when you do the math on that, that was just, it sounds like pennies, but it's pennies more on millions of pounds of product year over year that he always got and his competitors did not, because they preferred to do business with him. And that was the difference maker. And he grew the business and it expanded. It just kept on growing like a weed. That story really stuck with me as I witnessed it with my own eyes. And I think that principle applies to so many other businesses. Are you that company that your customers are among themselves are thinking, boy, we have to find a way to continue working with these guys because we prefer them. They're better in some dimension that matters to them, that's meaningful.
And I agree with you. And I think people don't realize a small difference in gross profit makes a massive difference in net profit. It's a multiplier effect from the top line to the bottom line. And when you start to understand the math, you start to go, wow. And if you are in a constrained business, what you were talking about, if I've only got 20 points of gross profit, you really need volume. Because most businesses, if that's all they've got, are going to significantly struggle without volume. That's just the reality of it, which means if that's the way you do business, you have to think I need to be a lean, mean machine, because you actually don't have much to spend. You can't, you're not, if you're $1 million business owner, you don't have $1 million to spend. You've got 200 grand to spend it
Right.
at that. And if you've only got 200 grand to spend and you need to pay your bills for your life, there's really not much left, is there? So you really have to be lean and mean unless you can pick up a couple extra points.
But let's look at the other side of that, which is typically seen as a bigger gross margin provider, be like a professional service. You're an engineering firm or a law firm or something. Margins are relative to your industry and to your competitive set, right? So what we're talking about is, if you're the preferred law firm, the preferred CPA for a particular category of business, and that's all about specialization, right? That's one of the things we definitely emphasize to people. You could be a general purpose CPA or CPA that only works with, let's say, manufacturers in your area. And that specialization means you understand how depreciation, other expensing strategies might play into somebody who has to buy, $1 million machines, CNC machines. That's a specialization. People will pay you a premium. They're not going to ask you what your rate is per hour. They're going to say, can you work with us? Can you please work with us? And, that's a huge difference maker. And, the example you gave, let's take let's use 10 million at 40 points is $4 million of gross margin. Great. But if you were somehow able to get 10% more margin than your competitors, in other words, 44 over 40, you're now sitting on a $10 million business for an extra $400,000. That's either to your bottom line or to something you reinvest in to drive growth. So that's exciting.
And you see the multiplier, 4 turned into 10 on the bottom, 4% on the top turned into 10% on the bottom. And that happens a lot. And I think that's why we really focus on how little things can make big differences. Everyone's trying to do big stuff. And when they start to realize how much little things can make a big difference, then they start to focus on the little things. And at the end of the day, that's really what it comes down to. Like you talked about the little things. When my client has something delivered that's not perfect, what's the little thing I do differently to bring value?
That was a literal commodity product. So Don's metasilicates weren't any better than the other guy's metasilicate powder. It's literally coming from the same places, and so on. But that little thing made them the preferred thing. So you think about the CPA. You got one job: make sure that I do my taxes correctly, that I'm doing an accurate accounting of my business, whatever that is. If you're using them as an example, so most people would stipulate that if I hired this CPA or this one, this attorney or that one, they're probably all going to do roughly the same job. So what are ways that you can actually stand out? You don't want your customers thinking they could probably all do the same job. You want them thinking, no one else can do it the way Ralph does it, the way Joe does it, the way, Acme Sprockets make sprockets, whatever that is. And I love what you said, Rocky, and I agree 1,000,000% with you. It's little things. And I always emphasize that, especially for most of my clients, I think similar to yours, small business owners, small and mid-sized enterprises, you're not going to be Apple. It's just not realistic that you're going to have the R&D to create a product that's a world. Occasionally, there's an outlier here and there. Software, sometimes you get that and so on. But for the most part, most Main Street, regular, everyday businesses aren't going to be something that is going to get written about in Harvard Business Review. It doesn't mean you can't set yourself apart in some meaningful way. And that's the thing that you really have to think about. And the way I like to ask my customers is simply this: to say, what would you do? What could you do that your customers would go, wow, that's amazing, I love that. And that your competitors would say, darn it, they're doing that. How are we going to keep up? If you can come up with that, and it's probably a small thing, it's a behavior, it's an attitude, it's a policy. You don't have to worry about necessarily the intrinsic product itself being that different, but the way people buy and where they buy, more so than ever today, people are choosing things, even in B2B categories, based on convenience, based on hassle reduction, risk reduction, time savings. Those are all things you can work on being better.
And it's also to understand who your buyer is, because a lot of times your buyer may not be an economic buyer. They may not care what the price is as long as they can get it through their system. What they care about is that their job got easier or that they wouldn't get blamed for something going wrong. Back in the old days, I always heard, no one got blamed for buying IBM, right? So it's the same concept, is how do you make life easier for your prospective buyer user within the company that you're doing business with if they are not an economic decision maker?
And even, I've often heard pushback on that thought. People who deal with large corporates where the economic buyer has a lot of prominence today. Professional procurement is a real thing. And I've just found, I say, okay, well, first of all, if you plan on selling to big corporates, if that's part of your business model, then you kind of have to suck it up, buttercup, and deal with the fact that you're going to deal with procurement. All the more reason to get the business user that benefits from your differentiation to really be a raving fan, because they can put internal pressure on procurement. That doesn't mean you're going to get, 2 times the sale price that your competitors. But again, it's all marginal. And you well put it, Rocky, a little bit on the gross margin really makes a lot of bit of difference on the bottom line.
So one of the things you do is you help businesses continue to grow and grow profitably. What are some of the biggest struggles you see as business owners try to go from 6 to 7, 7 to 8 figures?
Well, interesting. The 6 to 7 is the need for just additional leadership, right? You need at least a number 2, right? If you're the number 1, you're the founder, and all you have are worker bees, so to speak, then you're still directing everything. You're the traffic cop every day, and you're just exhausted. And, you're happy, maybe you're making some more money, maybe you're not, or you're trying not to spend the money on the kind of person you need. And I often see owners in that category. They're not typically folks that I focus on, but I meet them through, conferences and things like that. They ask me. And I said, well, it looks like you really could use a good, PM or a good COO to help you operationalize this. And I said, well, but I don't want to spend the money. And I said, well, okay. It's like, unless you get people working for free, it's going to be tough. Or you're really good at grooming somebody younger earlier in their career, and you're good at that. But if you're not, you're going to need to bring somebody in who has some chops to begin with. I think that's the first stage. When you get from, you're solidly in 7 figures, you're a $5-6 million company. There, you need processes. You don't just need the good people in leadership, but I think you need people doing the right ththings by agreement. So we just have to have some, and by the way, people think, does that mean 18 binders of 300 pages of, procedures? We can't run a business like that at that size. And I'd agree, because you need to be more nimble than that. That's your advantage when you compete with bigger companies, is that you can make quicker decisions. But there's some basic things you just need to have agreement on, like how you make the machine you make. It can't be every time you get an order, you're trying to make it up right then and there and say, well, how are we going to deliver on that? That should be figured out. And I've actually worked with clients that have been in exactly that situation. But the next transition, going from that 7-figure to 8-figure, you want to go from 8 million to 15. You want to really drive that next level of growth. Maybe you're trying to tee up an acquisition some 3 years down the road. That's what you're hoping for, thinking about. Then it's about leverage. And you have to leverage 3 things that come to mind, right? Certainly, you have to leverage the things that we just talked about, the things that set you apart. How do you emphasize them? Sometimes we have business operators, business owners that say, well, my customers know what we do for them. I'm saying, do they really? The things I don't know. I'll give you an example. Often in B2B categories, there's an invoice involved, documentation, right? Invoice. And there are companies that create invoices because they have old systems, and the invoices are almost impossible to read. Customers are frustrated by it, but nobody complains. You don't think it's a problem because nobody told you it's a problem until they shift or switch to somebody else. But if you've taken the time to simplify that simple thing, that document, tell them, hey, we've taken, we know what really matters is that our customers know what they get from us. So we've simplified our invoice. Can I walk you through it and show you how it can work? Can I get your input on it? That's emphasizing and doubling down and leveraging the things you're doing to create value for your customers. You have to remind them. And at every stage of your process, as much as possible, you have to let them know what you're doing for them, because they may not know. Or Mary may know, but Joe doesn't. Right? So you have to make sure Joe knows. The other thing is you have to leverage your people. And that's to say, in a small company, still a small company in that $8-9 million range, you probably have 30-person staff, 40, depending what you do, 30, 40 people. Everybody who touches the customer should be on point in terms of your messaging. What do we do? What do we set ourselves apart? You should have everybody be able to articulate that, not because they're salespeople, but because in normal conversations, they're going to talk about it. So I used the example before, I was just making it up out of whole cloth, CPA firm that only focused on contract manufacturers, for example. Well, they may have somebody answer the phone, somebody who deals with basic customer service. There's little ways they can make sure that that differentiation is conveyed in normal conversation. After all, since we really only focus on manufacturers like you, this is what we've learned. And there's a way to add, you add that little messaging factoid, those very tiny touch points, but that takes training. So if you want to leverage your staff, you have to train them. If you say, as I've run into so many business conferences, our differentiation is our customer service. I say, have you validated that? Have you done voice of customer analysis on that? Have you actually asked your customers if they think your customer service is as superior as you think it is? And you may find sometimes some uncomfortable truths come out of that process. But again, you can't leverage your people if you don't know what the customer perceives from your people. And then last, and this is more in your area, Rocky, but certainly you have to be creative in terms of working capital to drive growth. Like how do you measure, like you're going to ramp up a marketing campaign? How do you measure success on that? Or you're evaluating a new machine. What is the leverage for that new machine going to bring to you? Really think it through. And you have to now move from making decisions kind of on your gut, which got you there, to some more analysis. And I don't mean analysis paralysis, but I do mean you got to give it some, like these are big numbers now. You're going to lease, $2 million stations for productivity's sake. You got to really be careful on what does that look like and how does that affect cash flow. And the other thing, and I've run into this in the last 2 years, some manufacturing, especially manufacturing, started booming despite COVID or actually because of COVID. And it's just like the used car dealers thinking that they became marketing geniuses overnight because now I can get premium for my car. Well, you did nothing. It was just the rising tide. And there's this backlog on supply chains that were making a lot of manufacturers become very successful. But I've actually asked them in a couple of settings, I said, wow, you grew 100% top line. I said, did you have to engage? Did you find all the people you needed? Well, no, it was hard to find the people I needed to meet the demand. I said, so did you start paying a lot of overtime? Oh, yeah, a lot of overtime. And I said, did you have to pay any rush charges for materials to meet those orders? Oh, yeah, absolutely, because everything was very hard to, and did you need to rent additional equipment or space? Yes. And so did you make any more money? And you know the answer to that, Rocky. It's
no.
No, but we're twice as big. And I said, are you going to stay twice as big, or was this just you met a pent up demand? And I'm not saying you shouldn't take orders if orders are there to be taken, but keeping an eye on how you can sustain that growth is, I think, a key to transitioning from that 7 to 8 figure. Do you have a growth engine, or was it just happenstance that got you some orders?
And I don't care what size company you are. I think the two that come to my mind are Peloton and Amazon. They started growing thinking that the pandemic had permanently changed their business demand. And Amazon started canceling warehouses and they've got a lot of cash, so they can move around things. Peloton got pummeled in the market because of what happened. And then they made a lot of different decisions. And it's funny because I was just listening to something from a book and they had a business owner on, and it was just that, they're like, so you went from where to where? 40 million to 100 million. We're all like, oh, 100 million. Wow, we would love to do that. That's amazing. Second question was, do you spend more or less time with your family? Less. Do you make more or less money? Less. And I think a lot of people don't realize that growth comes at a cost of time and money. And while it may look fancy on the outside, if you haven't built it well on the inside, you're not going to reap those rewards. Now, let's take a step back, because a lot of the things that you talked about, I think six-figure business owners should do. I think a six-figure business owner should teach their employees how to sell their value proposition. A six-figure business owner should start to build out systems and processes of how they're going to do things. Because when you go from 6 to 7 and you're up in the high to mid 7s and you haven't built it, all of a sudden you're going to hit massive resistance within your own organization. Well, we got here without it. Why do we got to do this now? Right? But if you take the time while you're growing to start laying this foundation, then when you get there, all you have to do is refine and double check that everything's good. Because if you make small mistakes at 600,000 or 6 figures, they become big mistakes at 7 figures, and you may not get into the high 7 figures because you didn't have enough cash, or you ran into little problems that turned into big problems that you threw a lot of money at. And now you're overworked and overtired. So I think I've always believed if they're going to do it at this end, then let's begin at the beginning and let's build our processes and systems right from day one, whatever we can do, inappropriately, because you don't want to build the cart before the horse, right? So let's get things going, but little by little, let's build them out so that we can enjoy that steady growth and have everything in place as it comes around. And it's all culture.
Well, it's kind of, Rocky, what came to mind immediately was a picture of, and I've lived it, of one of those where you assemble furniture, when you buy, like, definitely check the instruction that says these parts should be in the box. Make sure they're all there, because once the thing stood up and you realize you're missing this, and it's always some weird part that you need a special tool to turn or something. Make sure that's all in the box to begin with. So I love the advice. I mean, I think you're 100% right. Build it right so it's in the DNA of the organization. It's a lot harder to lay in a new DNA on a company that has 50, 60 people that were doing it a certain way because they were trying to do it the best they knew how. And they were happy, they were doing their job. And now you're telling them you're not doing your job right. And they say, well, wait a second. I've been working really hard for you all these years as you've been growing the business. So I love that advice. Build it from the ground up properly. And it has a much greater chance of standing strong when it gets tall.
And that's the problem. Like when you build a house, it takes forever to get the foundation in. And it seems like it's going slow and no progress is being made. But if you don't build a solid foundation, everything on top of it's going to collapse when you come under a little bit of pressure. And let's face it, every business comes under a little bit of pressure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You don't know where it's coming from.
Truer words, Rocky. That's great. Love it.
If people would like to learn more about you and your services, what's the best way for them to find you?
Sure. Well, they can learn about what we do at valueprop.com. That's VALUEPROP.com. And if they want to talk to me, they could simply go to josepalomino.com and they get on my calendar, and I'd be happy to talk. If somebody thinks I might be able to help them, or they just want to know more about what I can do with companies like that, be happy to talk to them.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Rocky, my pleasure.
Are you clear on what your gross margins are? What can you do to improve them? Improving gross margins has so much of an impact on your bottom line. And that's why we focus on it for our clients. Are you laying a strong foundation for growth that will allow you to easily shift to the next level? Regardless of where you are on the journey, the principles apply to your business. So take the time to think and then make them part of your culture, because it will make you more profitable. Remember, you don't need more resources. You need to be more resourceful. Remember to focus on the bottom line. Thank you. If you've got any feedback for me, always appreciate it. Hope all is well. Have a wonderful day.
If you'd like for us to be a part of your profitability journey, we have different programs available ranging from do-it-yourself to one-on-one coaching. Our course, The Profit Blueprint, teaches you everything you need to know to transform your profitability. There are 3 different tiers ranging from DIY to done with you so that businesses of all sizes can get the support that's best. Join the waitlist in the show notes to get more information and be a part of the next cohort. If you want a done for you service, you can hire us as your chief profitability officers. We only work with a handful of clients, so they all get our full attention. We work with business owners who have or are growing to $500,000 to $10 million in revenue. You can use the scheduling link in the show notes to get on our calendar for a good fit conversation to see if we're the right people to support you and how we can help you.
This episode of the Profit Answer Man podcast is brought to you by SMBpodcastnetwork.com. The network is a collection of podcasts and shows from around the internet which focus on bringing you interviews with amazing guests who share actionable advice, ideas, and information for small and medium-sized business owners and entrepreneurs. Visit www.smbpodcastnetwork.com to find more great shows and easily subscribe to be notified of new episodes. It's a great way to discover quality content. If you've discovered us via the network, then I hope you enjoy today's show and will consider subscribing directly so you never miss our episodes. Remember to check out my other podcast, Richer Soul, where we talk about how to live the ultimate life and be the best business owner you can be. As we close out, let's repeat the mantra. Revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is king. Have an abundant and profitable week.